Happy, so excited. I've got this group here. I don't know if I've been any more excited than I have about this group because this is new territory for me. I'm learning about this performance based hiring real time with the creator of it. He's the creator of the concept, and then I've got this great panel of executives and talent acquisition leaders that are going to come together, and we're going to just kind of he's going to kind of test some of the concepts on us. We're going to ask questions to Lou, see if we can throw him off. He says it's impossible. We're going to try our best. Uh, but we're going to go through this whole program and we're going to make it fun. So those who are just piping in, please let us know where you're signing in from, what city, what state, what country. I will be reading your comments as we go along. So we're like that. We're going to acknowledge you as you come in the room. So feel free and say hello to us, ask questions, give us feedback, and let us know where you're coming in from. So let me just go ahead and introduce my panel. I'm very excited about all of them. I have, as I mentioned before, Mr. Lou Adler. You may have seen him on LinkedIn Live or LinkedIn Learning, but welcome to the show, Lou.
Happy to be here. Thanks, both.
Excellent. And then on my top right-hand side, I've got Miss Ann Miller. She is the VP of Memorial Hermann, located here in Houston, Texas. Memorial Hermann Health System, an organization with just under 30,000 employees, and certainly looking forward to your contributions today. Welcome to the show, Ann.
Thanks, Rollis.
Excellent. And then I have on my bottom left hand, I have Mr. Sebastien Girard, better known to me as Seb. He is coming in from North Carolina, and he's with the Atrium Health Organization. He's SVP of the workforce at Atrium Health, roughly about 70,000 employees in the Carolinas. So welcome to the show, Seb.
Honored to be here, and I'll do everything I can to destabilize Lou. So we'll see if we can make it happen.
Okay, excellent. And then I also have in my bottom right-hand corner, we have Carlos Fernandez. He's a fellow HHHRA board member. He is a talent acquisition manager at Houston Methodist, roughly about 25,000 strong in employees. So he's got a different perspective he can also add as a manager. So we appreciate having you on the show as well, Carlos.
Happy to be here, Rollis. Hi, everybody.
Awesome. Okay, we already have some folks who are already coming in. They're already saying hello, like Mr. Brian T. Stark. He says, hello, I'm signing in from San Antonio, CEO of Bantam Medical Services. Nice to have you, Brian. And we have Joanne as well. Okay, so please get us started, Lou. We're anxious to hear about this. And we're going to talk about how, of course, any organization could probably use these concepts, but we're all healthcare focused here. And those who are watching, if you're from another industry, that's fine. You can pipe in whatever industry you're from. And if you have questions on that, feel free to pipe in with that. But take it away, Lou.
Okay, so I'm actually thinking about this as you guys said it. I've kind of changed what I'm thinking about, but that's okay. So let me give you the quick introduction to performance-based hiring, and I'm going to give it two stories. I became a recruiter before most of you who are listening were born, or you were toddlers. And it was for a plant manager for a company making automotive components. In a moment, I'm going to give you one for an advanced practice nurse, but you'll get the whole gist as I see the bridge between the two. So this is 40 plus years ago, became a recruiter. I had a heavy manufacturing background. And I talked to the CEO of this company, said, hey, Lou, we're looking for a plant manager. And he gave me this job description. 10 years of this, a background in this, an engineering degree here, and all this stuff that typical job descriptions you'd see today, 42 years ago. And I said to Mike, Mike, this is not a job description. This is a person description. Well, let's put the person description in the parking lot and tell me what you want the person to do. He said, oh, that's interesting concept. Nobody's ever asked me that question before. I said, I want someone to turn the plant around. So I said, okay, let's walk through the plant. And we spent an hour in the plant. The machinery was poorly maintained. The labor performance was non-existent. The warehousing organization was terrible. The scrap was piled up in one corner. The warehousing system was flawed. And I said, I'll find someone who can fix all this stuff. And 3 or 4 weeks later, we found a plant manager who could do that work. I have never used a job description since that day that lists skills, experience, competencies, and behaviors, because they're not job descriptions. They're person descriptions. So I always say, what does the person need to do to be successful? So now let me go fast forward 20 years, maybe 30 years from that date. And I'm going to say this was 2005 to 2010, roughly. And it was at Health East Care Systems. And there was a woman there who's a director of talent. I have lost track of her, but her name was Trudy Konepke Campbell. She was the director of talent, and she wanted to bring performance-based hiring into Health East Care Systems. I think it's in Minneapolis. I was on the phone, I believe. I don't, unless I had to be summer, because I don't go any place where it's too cold. Neither here nor there. We had the whole nursing staff there, and the whole head nursing practice, and they said, hey, we're looking for an advanced practice nurse. And they had all this list, certified, all this kind of stuff. And I said, this is not a job description, it's a person description. I know they need the certification, but let's assume they pass that. What would the person need to do to be considered a remarkable advanced practice nurse? We spent 45 minutes on the phone, and it was take the lead on implementing all new medical practices at the nursing level for all new technologies. And I just said, okay, what do the best people do to achieve that? What do they do differently? And they become subject matter experts. They become, they interface very closely with the vendors. They attend conferences. They train people in the company. But it turned out 5 or 6 or 7 performance objectives. Then Trudy asked the head of the nurse practice there, she said, should we implement performance-based hiring the way Lou just described it? And the head of the advanced practice nurse said, why wouldn't we? This is a much better way to hire great people. That's my story about performance-based hiring. Focus on what people need to do to be successful. Ask yourself, what do the best people do that makes them the best? Recognizing that obviously they have to have enough experience. They have to have the certifications. They have to have the degrees to get in the game. But that just gets them in the game. What do the best people do to be exceptional once they're in the game? That's what performance-based hiring is all about. So let me just open it up there and hopefully challenge your thinking a little bit, at least at that level.
I like that. That's interesting. Okay, so Carlos, I see you shaking your head on this. You must have a thought here.
I know Carlos. I already called him yesterday. He told me 3 questions you're supposed to ask.
Okay.
And of course, I forgot them. No, as far as I just the thing that jumps out to me is our intake calls. And thinking like a hiring leader, because when Lou hit on something. The hiring leaders, they don't think I need a marketing expert or a marketing specialist. They think of find me another Sally Joe. Sally Joe has these great skills. What are those great skills that makes Sally Joe an excellent marketing specialist? So starting to go down that conversation and then, packaging that branding on the recruitment side to really leverage that level of engagement with the candidate. I think that's the important piece. But ultimately, having the dialogue with the hiring leader to communicate that level of detail to the candidate is ultimately what we're all looking to do on the recruitment side.
So, Ann,
I would say, just to answer Carlos.
Sure.
What I would say, if a manager says, hey, we really like Sally Joe. I said, what is Sally Joe? What makes her remarkable? She's a great communicator. How does she do that? Demonstrate to me what that looks like on the job. She's proactive with respect to coaching others. Great. Walk me through what that looks like on the job. Whatever a hiring manager says, I always want to translate that into some outcome that's measurable. Because if the hiring manager doesn't understand what that looks like on the job, they say, well, that doesn't look like Sally Joe. So you can't use that Sally Joe. That's a good bridge, but you still want to understand what the performance outcomes are. Now, all of a sudden, you open the pool to everybody, not just Sally Joe, but Mary Jane, Billy Thompson, whatever. So I think that's how I would leverage that idea in the conversation during the intake meeting.
Interesting. Okay. So, Ann, I'm curious. I see the wheels are turning here. What are your thoughts when you hear this about job description versus person description? I want to see how that lands on you. I'm curious.
I totally agree. It's been a long time since I've seen a great job description, that really defines the essence of the job. They're usually written not by the person who is in the job or even that associated. They're typically written by HR. And so we take a swag at what needs to be in the job description. But it usually is just a bunch of high level words, I think, that don't really get at the essence of what the job does. And like Lou, I think, once you've been in this business a long time, you definitely learn to ask the questions that are going to help you identify the best candidate and hit home with the hiring manager. I mean, they want to hear those types of things, and so I absolutely agree. But writing getting good job descriptions, I think, is something that at least I haven't worked for an organization that has perfected it yet.
Okay.
It's hard work. I will say that it's hard because everyone is different. But if you want to hire a different person, that hiring manager has to understand the job and relate it to the candidate whom they hire. And if they don't know that, it's problematic if the person is going to be successful. So if you don't clarify expectations up front, they don't have to be perfect when you're defining the job, but by the time you make the offer, that candidate should clearly understand what the expectations for that job are before he or she accepts the offer. And it's hard because each one is different. I mean, you can take a general template, but then all of a sudden you got an infinite number of options. So that's what makes it difficult, but people want to keep it up. But to me, that's the key to hiring a great person, is understanding the work.
Absolutely. Seb, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, and I have quite many, but I'll start with a question. Lou, how do you measure the success? So what's your benchmark of success to say that it was a good hire on performance yeah?
That's a great question. You want to keep on going, Sebastien? I don't want to cut you short.
No, because I think me hearing the answer can guide some of the rest of the thoughts that I have. Yeah.
Okay, so let's just take this advanced practice nurse, and I be frank, I don't remember all the details. I just kind of remember there, and I didn't totally finish it. My partner did, but the advanced practice, the head of the nursing, she really loved it. But it was clearly, let's just assume that the end objective was within 1 year, set up a technical implementation methodology where we can bring new technologies into Healthy's care system, and everybody who's going to be using this equipment understands it and effectively can use it in real time. Let's assume that's what it is. So then if I was interviewing a candidate, I would just say to the candidate, here's one of the things we're looking for in this job. And we describe that the objective is. Can you tell me about something you've accomplished that's most comparable to that? And then I would ask a series of questions. Well, how did you get that job? What did you do? How did you implement the training? How did you work with the vendors? Where did you learn all this technology? Walk me through what the training class looked like that you trained in. How does the real-time test in a real situation, emergency room or wherever it may be, using this technology? I really spend sometimes 15 minutes to a half hour understanding their major accomplishments. Now they come on the job. As part of it is, I've also asked, what would a good person do in the first 30 or 60 days? Well, they've learned the system. What would they do next? Well, they probably attend some conferences. They probably put together a plan of action or something together in the next 3 months. They'd probably start working with the existing technology and upgrading it. So I'd have an understanding of what that job looks like from the moment, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 6 months, full year. So now I've actually understood the job. I've mapped out the job before the person actually takes it. So now that candidate takes it, and I say, hey, candidate, you didn't do what you're supposed to do in the first 30, 60 days, or you did that, but you didn't do it this well. So you can, once you understand what the job is and you sequence it over time, you can just measure the candidate in real time once they're on the job. And if the job changes, at least you know why that changed. Well, we decided not to go with this vendor, or we decided not to put the training program in. Well, that's disappointing, but at least you understand what it is. But if you don't have the benchmark of the job, you just have too many variables to even get control of what's happening. So I don't know if that's your answer, Sebastien, but that's the kind of gist of it.
It's helping. So let me share a couple of stats just to get your point of view. So because one concept that we're working on right now, where I am right now, but we were mastering in previous life, we call it hiring for retention, which is different than hiring for performance, right? And the mindset was the number one reason of turnover in the US is a lack of fit with your direct supervisor, followed by very closely by a lack of fit of the culture. And we can end up with somebody that is highly performing, but if they're a misfit to your culture or to the direct supervisor, you just end up with a high performer that gonna either create damage to your organization or even worse, quit after 3 months, 6 months, et cetera. So the mindset of hiring and the mindset is also, and we see it in sports team, right? The teams that win championship is not always a team with the most superstars. It's often the one that has that gel, right? That chemistry together. So how do you include that mindset of retention, culture fit, bus fit in your hiring for performance mindset?
Okay, so first I'd say they're not mutually exclusive.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's why I'm. Yep.
Okay, so then I say that's the question Carlos forgot to ask. So Carlos, this is the question I told you should ask Sebastien. Part of our interviewing process, because not only is the job part of it, the interview is part of it. Now I'm going to kind of give you two threads here. One is the concept called win-win hiring. Win-win hiring is the idea that you don't hire for the start date, you hire for the first year anniversary date. And on the anniversary date, the candidate says, I'm glad I took that job. And it's exactly what you told me it is. And I love working here. And the hiring manager says, I'm glad I hired you. The person's great. Now, getting to win-win hiring condition is not insignificant, but that crosses the bridge or builds the bridge that you talked about, Sebastien. So this is where the interviewing process takes place. I've asked the candidate a series of questions about their performance as it relates to the job. But I didn't give you all of the fact finding. We have a talent scorecard that's built on what I call the hiring formula for success. The hiring formula for success says ability to do the work in relationship to fit is what drives motivation. And because motivation is so important, we square it. Ability to do the work is all the soft skills, hard skills, performance skills. The fit factors are fit with the culture, pace, organization, decision-making, fit with the hiring manager, and intrinsically motivated to do that work. So the formula is ability to do the work in relationship to fit, and there's a bunch of dimensions to that. That drives motivation because motivation is so important, we square it. You need all of those factors, exactly what you said, Sebastien. Most companies just hire for the start date, and they don't even measure performance. That would get them halfway there.
Yeah.
No, if you don't get the fit right, you're done. But let me just say this. We actually made 1,500 placements. When I was doing a full-time search firm, we had a bunch of people. For 20 years, we actually tracked, and we gave a one-year guarantee. One of the first firms in the world to give a one-year guarantee. 7% failure rate, 7%. Half of those failures were because the hiring manager and the candidate didn't get along. It was rarely ability. It was a clash between the hiring manager and the candidate. And it's still difficult to get. But when I find a hiring manager who's inflexible or difficult to deal with, you really have to work hard. Pace of the organization is another one, decision-making, and team collaboration is critically important. We can get into how do you measure. There's a couple of proxies that indicate a great fit that are shortcuts or hacks, but basically that's how we cover it.
Interesting. I do have a couple of comments that came in. I love all this conversation so far. Brian Stark, he says, I fully agree with this. As leaders, having your hiring managers walk you through how that candidate truly stands out, regardless of how many years experience they have, as we typically look at. But did the hiring manager even scenario walk the candidate? Great stuff here. Okay. It says hiring for retention plus demonstrating measurable performance equals successful outcomes. What are your thoughts on that?
I think he took a shortcut to the hiring formula for success with that one.
Okay. Now
I'm going to give that as an answer anyway.
Okay. So and you've heard a little more. And I see your wheels are turning here. What are your thoughts on what you're hearing? Because I'm curious as to what your stance is on this.
Yeah, I agree. I think I definitely like what Sebastien said. I think it's that key is just it's both, right? It is definitely a formula or a recipe. I mean, the success, they can have one half of the equation, but if they don't fit with the culture, or their man, it's not going to work. I mean, and it's interesting. I see it. I see it a lot with leadership. in leadership hires, where if a leadership, if it's almost like if it's not going to work, it's not going. You'll know it. It usually takes more than a year, but it's less than 2 years. Like the leaders that I see fall out because of that, they can do the job, but they don't have that fit. But they usually get through the first, was ready to throw in the towel, but they don't make it the second.
You know what? I've seen that, because I've heard them say, I don't want to leave too soon, because if I'm a leader, even if I don't like it here, if it's not working out, I don't want to leave too soon. I got to at least stick it out for maybe another year or whatever the case is, but then they might not make that second year. I've heard that.
Especially if you uprooted them.
Yeah.
And I think it's both, right? I think unfortunately a lot of organizations measure hiring managers on turnover. And I say unfortunately, I mean I definitely think there's an accountability piece to it, but also you see managers want to keep people way longer than they should have because they don't want to get dinged for losing talent. And and so, I think my question to Lou might be the impact of when you don't have the right fit, the impact it has on the rest of the staff.
That's a great question. Let me answer your leadership one too, because as you were mentioning that, I thought that was going to be your question. So you did throw me a soft hard ball. You hit the back of the head. Yeah, right. And I remember doing a search, and most of the searches I did over the years, when I don't do search anymore, we do training and we combine it with training. But I remember one was a CEO, and it was definitely when we talked about that, I asked, what does a person have to be to successful in the first year? Well, this one actually had to be successful year 1, 2, 3. There was a company was going public. They were expanding. They had to turn around a division. Pretty complicated job. So what I did is I talked to a candidate. I said, this is like a 3 to 4 year thing. Tell me about you did a project that lasted 3 or 4 years. So I extended the project, and I did it. I wasn't thinking about it. I just did it. And I remember the guy was a group president at Motorola, and he's a great guy. And I was probably an hour and a half on that 3.5 year project. When I actually met him in person, he said, none of the board members asked me as much questions as you did. I had a fiduciary responsibility, so I don't know that it was because I was great. I don't think it was altruistic. I wanted to make the guarantee right. So I take it more seriously than some hiring managers. They want to do it quickly. I want to do it right. But the other idea, so now I'm going to kind of go back to your question on turnover. And I can't answer the question exactly when, at what point in time. What I can answer is, how do you determine if a manager has a lot of turnover? But that's what I'm good at interviewing. I'm not really a good manager. I'm a terrible man, but I'm good at interviewing and finding people who are good managers. So I just ask managers, hey, walk me through the teams you've built. I want to understand it. So draw an org chart. I actually have people draw org charts. Go on the board, draw the org chart. I want to give them the names. Give me the names, just first names. How long has the person been there? How many people did you bring in? How many people from your group got promoted into other companies? So I'm really digging deep into how this person led and managed teams. So I get a sense of the qualities of those people are developing, hiring and developing people, promoting people internally, getting their people developed and moving them forward. So I get a good sense of that. Indirectly, then I would say, is when I see a good manager, I know the skills that they bring to the table. If they've had a lot of turnover, I probably would never recommend them to hire. But on the other hand, I'd say was it Red Scott? I think this guy, I heard this quote 30 years ago, hire slow, fire. No, I think it was fire fast, manage slow. And I'm sorry, I don't remember. See, you got it. It was something about go very slow when you're hiring, very fast when you're firing. If you made a mistake, cut it short, but hire very slowly and don't get yourself here in those kind of positions.
And it's almost the opposite in today's. I mean, I'm always amazed that people will want to spend, I'll have executives say, just schedule me for 30 minutes with a candidate because I'm so busy. And I'm thinking, how can we make a hiring decision in 30 minutes? Like none of us would marry a spouse or somebody after a date for 30 minutes. Why would you pick someone that you want to have, that you see more than your family under pre-COVID, and yet you only want to spend 30 minutes with them, and you're going to make that hiring decision.
Yeah.
I think what you just said, Ann, in my mind, I've been around a lot of years.
Yeah.
And I remember I got kicked out of a lot of meetings. Carlos, I think, was the last time I got kicked out of a meeting at LinkedIn after I met Carlos. I don't know if I got kicked out. I think they said I was. I have been kicked out of a bunch of meetings because I said, nothing's going to change the way you guys do stuff. Making a hiring decision is, for a senior level executive, you're talking about 10, well, even for a mid-staff level, it's at least 2 to 3 times a person's salary. So $300,000-$400,000 decision, you make it in 30 minutes. This is as sophisticated a decision as any investment you're going to make. For an executive, it's 10 times that. How can you possibly make a decision like that? So I'm agreeing with you. But then that really demonstrates why do even people allow hiring to make those kind of decisions? It's not sophisticated. Why has not a system for hiring been established and put in place where the company says, no, this is the way we're going to hire people? This is as important a decision we ever make. We have to have a system behind it. And now SEC is actually saying, you've got a huge investment in your capital assets and your human capital. You have to start measuring it and have to understand what you're doing to strengthen it and also to bring people in. So I think there's a lot of issues around it that say that's symptomatic of a bigger issue, what you just described there.
So we make fast hiring decisions and then we take forever to let people go.
Right.
That's a true statement.
Right.
Yeah. So thanks for the folks who are just now coming in, Johnny Lynch and Chris Melapores. Appreciate you guys coming in. And I want to just check in with the rest of our audience and see how they're enjoying it so far. And it looks like they are, from what I can see.
I do have another question for Lou, if it's possible.
Yes, feel free. Go ahead.
So I have a couple of questions, but I'll pace myself. But Lou, how do you feel about assessments?
Okay, so I get a lot of grief on assessments. So I've got to go back. So here's my general thinking, is I give them 100% for the 3 or 4 finalists because they give you some good information. But in general, an assessment, other than the cognitive skills or skills, those are actually interesting, but it's timing standpoint. In general, assessments only represent preferences, not competencies. Number 2, they're not predictive. They're confirming indicators, not predictive indicators. Now, people at the predictive index and DISC will tell you that, but I've actually argued with their chief scientists on this, showed them the statistics. They're at best confirming. There's just too many false positives to get there. Now, the false negatives of people who take the test is valid, but think about all the people who won't take the test because they don't want to be demeaned by the process of the test. So if you take it one level higher at the system level, you say, from a systematic standpoint, if the test, even if it was great, people don't take it, it's not a good test. So I like to give the test to 2 or 3 finalists because it does give you some more interesting insight, second round of interviews, good questions you can ask, but it also ignores flexibility. So now the reason I'm giving you this emotional response, Ann, is I'm going to go back to 1982 when I had my first DISC test. And I was a recruiter. The company says, well, he just said, Lou, this is the test we give to all candidates. And the guy looked at it. He said, Lou, you're a terrible analyst, but a great influencer and a great outgoing person. And I said, Bernie, that's not true at all. I like to party, but I'm really a good analyst and I really am an engineer. I just prefer to do the other stuff. But if you get me in a real tough technical problem, I could go for days without talking to anybody and try to solve it. That's when I knew right away that there was a problem with them in terms of predicting performance and even all this exclusionary stuff. Now, I've probably taken 20 to 30 or 50 tests. I know that I took a predictive index about a month ago, so we've changed it all. There's still a bunch of, I'm sorry, it was exactly what I said. Preferences, not competencies, exclusionary, too many false negatives and too many false positives, and you don't justify an important test like that with when a third of the time it's wrong. That's how I honestly feel about it, Ann. And yet I give them 100% of the time a finalist, and I always give a cognitive skills test with everybody because there are a lot of good predictive indicators. I actually talked to Hunter and Schmidt, who wrote that thing 20 years ago. I can't remember the guy in Iowa I talked to at one point in time. So.
Have you
that was a long question, but I love that.
No, it's good. I don't disagree with you. I don't know if I always find the value in them, but I definitely think a lot of organizations have moved to that assessment process up front. I'm sure there's a ton of candidate assessment fatigue. And, I know in our own organization, it's the same thing. Why do we make people go through so many hoops just to reject them anyway?
Right. Yeah.
So now I'm going to give you an anecdote. This is an anecdote. There was a company, I won't tell you the name of it, in Waco, Texas. I knew the president of the company. It was a assessment test that combined personality testing with cognitive skills testing. And I knew the president. He said, Lou, have every one of my sales reps buy 3 copies of your book if you say something positive about our test. So that was what I said. I think this is a great test for finalists. That's all I had to say. He said, oh, you said positive things. He said, I don't agree. I sell tests. I make money by selling lots of tests. And he said, I drive a jet and you drive whatever it was. So nonetheless, he had all his salespeople buy 3 copies of the book, the 2nd edition of Hire With Your Head. The 4th edition is coming out in September, but he bought the 2nd edition in 2001, and it became #1 on all business bestsellers on Amazon. It was a good book. It wasn't that good a book, so I don't want to overplay it. But it was because of him. It was, it's a good book. It's worth $20 or whatever it was, but he did put it right there. I mean, I couldn't believe it. He said he was going to do it, and he did it. So I'm glad I said something positive. So and it is worthy of that, and I apologize for that anecdote, but that's the truth of why my book was number 1 or 2 on Amazon, all business bestsellers.
When Ann mentioned that, it reminded me of a documentary I saw not long ago called Persona. You guys have seen that? Okay, so you're shaking your head.
I know what is Persona. I studied Persona, but I don't know this documentary.
So they go into how these things start, like Myers-Briggs. It was a mother-daughter that came up with the Myers-Briggs, and she wasn't like a trained psychologist or anything like that. It was just a mom and a daughter who they just took this project on together. And that's like one of the most famous tests out there. And they go through all the different tests, and it's a very interesting documentary. I don't want to give it away, but I think it's on HBO Max or something like that. If you guys want to try it out, but it was really interesting, and how it's very pervasive. There's some organizations out there, even for very frontline type jobs, it is the barrier to get into the organization to take one of these personality type tests. And so it's a great question, and I think it's probably a question we should probably have on a whole show one day about personality tests. So Carlos, I know you had a couple of questions written down. I want to get your question. I want to go back to Seb. So what's your next question you have on your list? And then I want to get Seb's question.
Yeah, Seb touched on this earlier as far as really engagement. And, we've been talking a lot about retention and the 12-month strategy to assess performance in hiring. But engagement's the other factor, long into someone's career with the organization. So, Lou, could you talk a little bit about from that perspective, us all coming from healthcare systems, and I think we all probably have some sort of EOS involved survey as from that perspective. So how do we tie that into mix early on in the hiring process, or is that a gap?
No, I think it's definitely critical.
Lou,
so let me
Lou, before you answer, I just want Carlos to explain EOS, because we may have some people who aren't in the industry that may not know what that is. So if you could just quickly say what that is, then please, Lou, go ahead and answer.
Absolutely. So from our organization, probably similar to Ann and Seb, we have an annual employee opinion survey that hits on several competencies within our organizations, and how engaged the employee is from an organizational standpoint, leader standpoint, and then self-development standpoint.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so let me kind of address it, and I believe this will get at it. And I'll go back to Sebastian's question about how do you measure for fit. The hiring formula success says ability to do the work in relationship to fit. The fit factors are at least 3 or 4. Number 1, fit with the culture, fit with the hiring manager, and also say fit with the job. And fit with the job is intrinsic motivation to do the work you want done. And if you found a person who's competent to do that work, fits with the culture, fits with the manager, but isn't naturally motivated to do that work you want done, they will disengage with your organization. So, and that's why motivation is squared. So when I interview a candidate, so let's assume I was interviewing anybody for this advanced practice nurse or whatever it is, I just said, hey, when you're, I've always asked about initiative. when you were just sitting there, what kind of work did you like the most? Can you give me some examples of where you went the extra mile? Can you give me some examples of the stuff that you just went into a state of flow? And every single time I ask an accomplishment question, I'm always asking, what did you do where you didn't have to take any direction? You just did it because you just love to do it. Now, you ask that for 3 or 4 different accomplishments, you start seeing a pattern of where this person will naturally take the initiative. And if it's not, if that initiative isn't related to what you want done, that you took in the intake meeting, they'll be disengaged. I guarantee it. They will be disengaged. Now, will that relate to your survey? I'm not 100% positive, but it'd be hard pressed for me to believe it wouldn't. But then as long as I was measuring it, I'd say, wow, this person was totally engaged with this work. This is what happened. What was the cause of this problem after you did your survey? So then you'd start saying, hey, we have to start. This is what's called feedback. My background is a feedback systems engineer on nuclear missiles, just to tell you that's how I started. How I got to be a recruiter, you don't want to know. Unless you got extra minutes. That's actually a good story, but you got to get it down to only 2 or 3 people. We got to have beers. But
I love it.
But that's how I would do it. And when you get to a win-win hiring situation where the candidate says, I'm glad I took this job, they have to be engaged. How are you possibly going to get it? And if you don't tap into that person's intrinsic motivator, you're never going to get there. So now let's assume you get a person you tap into their intrinsic motivator, you got the pace, you got the culture, and they underperform still. It's because they don't it's usually that hiring manager is the problem. It's usually there's just a clash there of styles. So if you get everything else right, you usually, more times than not, I'm going to say 80, 90%, 75 to 85%, you'll be right, which is pretty good for hiring. You get 80, 85%, you're pretty good for hiring. So that's how I measure it. I believe Carlos, that would get hit your survey is focusing on intrinsic motivation to do the work. But if you don't define the work in the intake meeting, you'll never get there.
Like it. Okay, go ahead, Seb. What you got for us?
A couple of things. Well, first of all, Lou, you got me at the word beer. So if you're ever in Charlotte, you have to tell me. We'll share one. But one. Come on. No,
Seb,
beers with an S.
Okay, but Seb, you got to tell us what's your favorite beer? Let's go with favorite beer real fast. What's your favorite beer?
For Lou?
For you, for yourself.
Oh, gosh. Right now, I love the Sycamore because I'm all about microbrewery where I live. And Sycamore is a microbrewery in North Carolina. Yeah.
Sycamore. Okay, and those in the comments, I want you to put your favorite beer. Maybe we'll learn about a new beer today. Okay, so go ahead and ask your question. Go ahead, Seb.
Well, maybe one opinion and then two question. So, of course, I think the concept is extremely interesting. I come back to, I think performance without retention is nothing, and retention without performance is also nothing. So if I was in your marketing team, I would say, instead of performance-based recruiting, you need to be called retained performance-based recruiting, so to really show that retention component.
You can get that into 2 words, we'll go with it.
All right, well, your marketing department can think about it. But my 2 question is more how you're adjusting to the reality. And I want to show 2 realities to pick up your brain. So the first one is there's 2 boomers retiring for 1 Gen Y or X coming into the employment market. And before the pandemic, we were below 4% unemployment rate, which means we were in full employment into the US. And this is for all positions. So the second we talk about, specialized position like nursing, it was below 2%. So virtually everybody's having a job, which make the market extremely tight. So this is the first reality. So talent acquisition is stepping to the plate, basically 3 strike, just to start with, and retention become the name of the game. And the second one is when we look into the motivation factors of the newer generation, performance not in there, right? So don't get me wrong, they want to be successful. So there's a success component, but there's a strong desire to have a strong work-life balance, to have a gig economy, so to not even be on your payroll, right? So I want to do your job, but I want to do it at my own pace, in my own rules, in my own hours. So how is it adjusted to those concepts where the talent pool is already very tough? And I have leaders right now, maybe not in nursing, but I have leaders that tell me, Seb, I don't need the A+ person. A B+ or a B or a B- would be totally fine because this is so hard to find, and then it's so hard to retain that just find me somebody that is a fit, and we'll figure out how to make them good. Right, So what do you say to those things?
Well, let's kind of start off by what you just said, the supply demand.
Yeah.
if you have an excess supply of great talent, hiring is a heck of a lot easier. So that's, be real frank. On the other hand, and I make this statement, if you do a supply demand analysis and the demand for talent is greater than the supply, I mean, you have a scarcity of talent, you can't assume there's a surplus. So let me just kind of state that again. When the demand for talent exceeds the supply, you can't assume there's an excess supply and weed people out because they're never going to apply. So you just kind of put yourself into a loop that will kill yourself. So now let's go back to, if there's a scarcity of talent, you have to go attract people in. You have to track them on all of those factors you just said: retention, interest, work-life balance, and it's probably everybody has half a dozen variables of why they're going to select the job. Then you overlay that with win-win hiring. What is a person going to do in this job that would make them stay at least a year from now? And if an executive level position, a manager, let's say a year and a half, 2 years, an executive is 3 to 4 years. So you got to just think that length of time. An executive kills something that's in a year or two. So they got to be around at least for a couple of years. So now I'm going to give you a story, Sebastien. I don't know if this is exactly relevant, but I'll fake it apart to make it relevant. So this is 10 or 12 years ago, and there was a real scarcity of nurses. And I had an online training program. And this is where we bring all recruiters in, and it's a 4-part program. I'm not giving the infomercial for it, but it was a real training program. And the middle part was sourcing. And everyone had to do the first part, they had to define the job. The second one was sourcing. Call, and a woman said, well, I'm looking for an advanced, it was a flight nurse. And she said, and I know the thing was in February, she says, I haven't had this job posted since Thanksgiving. It was a flight nurse, and she had all this thing. I said, where is this flight nurse program up there? It was in Sacramento. And I said, why do people do that? And this is an online call. It didn't have Zoom. We didn't have video at that time, whole system. But and a woman said, I just said, why does a person get on that helicopter? And she said, because they save lives every day. So I said, okay, where is that in your posting? She said, what do you mean? I said, read your posting. Where does it say saving lives every day? She said, it isn't in there. I said, why not? It's advertising. I said, why don't you put it in the tagline? That's all I said. Put it in the tagline. I said, what does the title say right now? It says, flight nurse, Sacramento, something or other. I said, why don't you just change the Sacramento and put saving lives every day? Just put it there. So now it was the next Friday it was the interviewing component the next Friday. I said, before we get into that, did anybody have any luck on posting jobs? And I hear this blood-curdling scream. And literally, I said, what was that? And it was the woman, and her name was Paula, because I remember that was my first girlfriend in college. So I remember her name was Paula. And I said, why I remembered that, but I do remember it. She said, I posted the ad on Monster, Career Builder, on Tuesday. And all I changed was flight nurse, saving lives every day. Nothing else changed. I had maybe 20 responses since Thanksgiving.
I believe that.
And nobody any good. I've got 14 responses since Thursday, and many of them look great. She then, 2 weeks later, she calls after the course and she says, Lou, you can't believe it. We hired 4 people. All I changed was that word. 2 for the flight nurse program and 2 for the emergency room. So I think part of it is advertising. Yeah, she stole them from somebody else. I don't want to deny that. But if that's the situation, you're obligated to meet your client's requirements. That's what you have to do. Better advertising, more customization, tie into the candidate's intrinsic motivators. Give a little cheat. We created something for Aramco, totally unrelated here. Give a little card of why people will relocate to Saudi Arabia for engineering jobs. There were 7 reasons. We just threw a little graphic of it and say, okay, pick the 6 that you want. We'll kind of design a job around them. That's pure advertising and designing a job to meet the candidate's needs. So I tell you to spend more time with fewer people as long as they're the right people, but then you have to customize it. And you have to do that when the demand for talent exceeds the supply. Sorry, Sebastien, that was a long answer, but
I love it. That was good.
I love it too. Yeah. And that's Lou, man, that's my jam right there. You're just always looking at ways to make the message resonate with your audience, whoever that is. And so that's what we do constantly with our videos and our job postings and all that. Is like, are we speaking the language in their language, first of all? And then number 2, are we sharing things that they're actually interested in? Because everyone is tuned into the same radio station. I remember Zig Ziglar used to talk about this. What's in it for me, right? WIFM. So If we're not speaking to that, and we're just saying we're just going to post our job and everyone knows we're amazing, so they're going to apply, it just doesn't work anymore. Yes, you're amazing, but so are a lot of other companies. And so how do you differentiate? How do you make yourself different? So I love that. Okay. I do have a question.
Let me just real quickly.
Okay.
I looked for a business intelligence analyst probably 2 months ago. Some company was looking for one. So I went on and said, you got to reverse engineering your job postings to see what your job posting looks like if somebody's looking for your job, which is to your point.
Yeah.
This company is posting with like the 75th job listed. The only differentiator among 75 jobs was that logo. Every job was the same. Everyone was boring. So then you pick the prettiest logo. I mean, that's ridiculous to have your job defined by the quality of the logo you have. So I always tell people, define your EVP. Why would a top person want this job? What makes it different? And then advertise that. I just wanted to get that point across.
I love it. And I'll add one more point to what you just said. A lot of organizations don't realize this, for anybody who's watching, that 80% of your job traffic comes from job boards. So if you don't have all the information that's pertinent to that job seeker on that particular platform, you are not playing with a full deck. They're only seeing a portion. And so if you just have a job description, you don't have benefits, you don't have the reasons why they should be doing the job and that sort of thing, then you're going to be up against, unless everybody else has a equally bad job description, you're going to lose out to someone who thought enough to actually put more information there. I get this feedback from nurses all the time when I talk to them. They're like, we're tired of the copy paste. There needs to be more there. I want to know things like the benefits and the salary. And, have you won the Magnet Awards? What awards have you won? What kind of career progression do you have? They don't want to have to go all the way to the career site to find all that. They want to be able to analyze that on the fly on the job boards. That's one of the first things we do is we just make sure that we have the pertinent information in that job board because we know that's where those active candidates are. They don't want to go to all these individual sites first. They want to go, let's say, Indeed, Glassdoor, ZipRecruiter, if they're actively seeking. But then, like, you got the other issue, which is passive recruitment, where we're trying to go to their cell phone, Google, YouTube, whatever. It has to have things that's going to resonate with them and get their attention because there's just so much noise out there. So I love those points. Now, I know we're getting towards the end here. I do have one question I want to ask. And Carlos, I want you to answer. I know you already have one. And you can answer if you want. Lou, you can answer if you want. Your favorite beer. And then also, I have a question for you. If you had the choice between these two, you can start off, Carlos, because I know you already have a beer recommendation. If you had to forage for food that is guarded by a hornet's nest or by a nest of rattlesnakes, which one would you choose if you had to pick one of those two to forage for food along with your favorite beer, please? And those in the comments, I want you to also answer. Those who are watching. If you're watching the replay, I still want you to answer. Go ahead.
Right, so I haven't been amongst a horde of rattlesnakes, but I have been amongst a horde of boas in South America. So I'll take my chances with the rattlers.
Oh, oh wow, okay. You surprised me on that one with the way that story. What's your favorite beer?
Eighth Wonder. So it's a local brand.
Nice. So Houston brand. Okay, awesome. How about you, Ann? Which one would you pick of those two?
I would go with the Hornets.
Why the Hornets?
I feel like snakes can move really fast. I think I'd be better protected. I could cover myself maybe with my clothing with the Hornets and get in and get out. Maybe stay there high. But if I'm foraging for food, I'm probably looking down, and that's no. I'm not a snake person.
Me neither. Me neither. And what about the beer? You say you don't drink beer?
No, I don't drink beer.
I'm with you. I actually don't drink beer either, so I'm with you. I like rum, but not beer. Lou, what's your favorite beer, and which one would you take?
I don't have a favorite beer. If Sebastian's buying, I'm gonna have it. It doesn't matter to me. And let me just say this: forget the Hornets and forget the snake. It ain't gonna happen. I'm not going camping anymore, so I'm out of here. So I don't even want to try to attempt that one. Neither choice is positive. So I'll skip that whole thing, and I'll have more Zoom meetings.
By the way, those who are watching, and I want to give a special thanks for Lou. Lou is literally in an RV right now. He's traveling, but he took his time out to pull to the side, get stationary for us, and be on this interview today. So I really appreciate you doing that. I would like to open it up for any last questions you have before we kind of wrap up here. I think you may have had one more, right, Carlos?
If not, I have one.
Oh yes, we'll kick it to Ann then.
Are you sure, Carlos?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to ask Lou. So this past year, obviously, has changed a lot of things in how we hire. And so, what are some of your maybe recommendations with keeping that focus on performance-based hiring, but you're not even getting to meet the people in person? And what would you recommend?
That's actually a good. I think some things happen here that are quite profound, and they have to do with bias. I've always felt that as a recruiter, I would never spend a lot of time I wouldn't have a lot of candidates. So for any job I would have, because I've been doing it for many years, I don't need a lot of candidates to make one hire. But what I do is I find 2 or 3 really good candidates, I interview them, then I ask the hiring manager, hey, would you talk to this person on the phone? Because these are passive candidates. They're always on the fence. They're always in the top quartile. They're not jumping through the hoop to change jobs. But I get them to the stage as a recruiter. I said, I think this could be a good career move. Here's why. And we have all these things to demonstrate this could be a good long-term move. But I'd like you to talk to the hiring manager. So I've always forced the hiring manager to conduct an exploratory phone screen. And I tell the hiring manager, this is a dual-way street. This is a candidate sitting on the fence. You've got to assess them, see if they fit. The candidate's going to ask you questions, see if it's a career move. And if you like the candidate, invite him in for a full on-site interview. That was a tremendous technique. And if they really liked the candidate, and I gave them a scripted interview, so they knew it, and I gave them a little talk on how to conduct it. And when they brought the candidate in, number one, they owned the candidate. They felt responsible for this candidate. I spent time, I invested with this candidate, so they were more religious. They were more organized. They prepared ahead of time. It wasn't the recruiter's candidate anymore. It was my candidate. I brought that candidate in. Interesting enough, bias was limited. The impact of first impression was limited. It had so many powerful impacts because it was a structured interview on the phone. And many times it wasn't with video. Now it's video, and I don't know that it has, I'm not positive it's a bigger, better impact or not impact, but it was a scripted interview, and I told the candidates what they were going to talk about. So it was actually a very formal business, a very nice professional business conversation. And there wasn't a lot of ego on either side of the line. As part of a recruiter, in the early days, I met 100% of my candidates. I had to, as a recruiter. And I spent an hour and a half with candidates. So I really did a job there. But as I started getting graduated to a retained search firm, and this was in the 90s, more of my searches were national level. It's a long story, but you'll see where I'm getting here. So I interviewed all the candidates on the phone for hour and a half. And then when I met them, and then I would have the hiring manager interview them on the phone too for an hour and a half. Let's just make sure we interview before we invite them on site. And then when we met them on site, because we had a structured professional interview online, the actual on-site interview was much more powerful. So I'm almost thinking this thing with COVID forced people to have more phone screen interviews. And I think that's a real positive. I think it would be a disadvantage to skip that because there's a lot of, as we all know, that bias enters the system where you went to school. Our whole focus is if this person can do the job, which we define in the performance-based job description, I don't care if they're old or young, black or white, green or yellow, physically challenged or not. I don't care what their sexual preferences is. If they can do this work, they deserve the job. Now, I actually had the #1 labor attorney in the country agree with that. He said traditional job descriptions listing skills and experiences are not objective unless you scientifically determine that 10 years of this and a degree here is, you haven't scientifically predicted that. That's as subjective as anything. Just the fact that it's an objective number you can check mark doesn't mean it's criteria, objective criteria. Now, obviously, a certification, a degree, and medical, that of course they have to have that. That's objective. But everything else you put down, if it's not scientific, it's a subjective thing that you're pretending is objective. And so my answer is, I love phone screens. I think they should continue. I think they should be scripted, semi-scripted anyway, so you at least know what an agenda of what you're trying to get out of it, as opposed to just helter-skelter, random, make a judgment. So I think the impact of first impressions are in a very positive way minimized. The negative aspects of first impression are minimized as a result of phone screens. that's probably the short answer to your long question, or my
Thank you.
I
long
love
answer.
it.
Apologies.
That was good. Okay, really quick, because I know we're going to wrap this thing up. If you could take a boat ride around or through any city in the world, what city would you choose? And if it doesn't have a waterway, let's assume you're gonna just go ahead and give it one. Which city would you like to have take a boat tour through? Lou, you want to start us off?
You give me. Well, I've actually done that.
Okay.
So I tell you, I've been through the boat tour through Paris. I've been through the boat tour through Berlin from. I'm trying to think where it was from. They're all. You take a boat tour through a real city, they're phenomenal. So they're great. So I can't say that I have a favorite. I've done a lot of boat tours and I love them. So I'm sorry I can't
Okay.
answer your question.
We'll stick with Paris then. You said that first. Anne, do you have a favorite one?
Like Lou, I've been on many cruises through Europe and so forth, and so, gosh, a boat tour. I'll pick. I mean, I think Washington D.C.
Ah, okay. Carlos, I know you got to run, so tell us before you head out. What you got?
Washington State. It's on my bucket list. So I hear really nice things. The Washington State to Canada tour.
Oh, nice.
It's on there.
Very good. Seb.
Because you said both, I'll say Tromsø in Norway, which is at the north of Norway, where it's supposed to have the most beautiful northern lights in the world.
See, I always get a good idea when I ask these kind of questions. Okay, well, y'all were amazing today. Thank you for your time. We're already at the end of the hour. I can't believe how quickly it went by. I want to thank all of you for your time. Is there one thing we can't get back is time? So thank you for investing it with us. Hopefully it was time well spent for you. Hopefully for those of you who are watching, thank you for watching today. And we'll hope to see you soon, everybody. Bye. So say bye, everyone. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Rollis.
Take care. Thanks
Thank
so much.
you.
Take care.
Have a great rest of the day, y'all. Appreciate you, Lou. You're amazing.
You done here, Rollis?
We are done. I hopefully you could come back. We'll do it again, huh?
You bet. I'll do it when I'm more. Well, I'll plan ahead a little bit better next time.
Did you enjoy it?
It was great fun. I always enjoy this stuff.
Awesome.
My back is killing me.
All right. Well, appreciate you. Have a good one. Appreciate you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
You're good. I mean, you were good already, so. Well,
yeah, for whatever reason, I'm hitting the end stream button. It's not.
okay.
Not allowing me to do it. It's really weird. Oh, I see why. I see why. There we go. Well, I'm hoping it's going to do it. Right.